Hello, all, and welcome back to the John Edwards Show. Today I've come across a rather interesting spirit that some of you may know. He's a very talented film writer, editor, producer, director, actor, author, and even a music composer. I introduce you to the tramp, Sir Charles Spencer Chaplin.
You're too kind, John, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm a big fan of all your work, and there's so much I'd like to ask you here today. Why don't we start with who was your biggest role model while you grew up, and how did they help you achieve your success?
Well, I'd have to say my mother was my biggest role model in my life. She was a singer and performed in music halls when I was young, and I would be backstage for some of her performances. Mother would often dress up at home and act out or sing her parts to keep us entertained, and I remember how much joy it brought my brother Sidney and I. But when I was 5, though, my mother started getting ill. It made her lose her singing voice, and her ability to provide for us became harder. I believe her hard work and determination, plus growing up with the acting and performances always around, made me want to get into the business and entertain people.
I've heard about your mother's illness, and it seems that because of it, you were pretty much on your own at an early age. What did that entail?
And my father left when I was about a year old, so I was just with my mother, Sid, and I. When I was about 7 was the first time my mother was committed to an asylum, and I was taken to a workhouse. Seemed to be back and forth after that. Mother would be released, and I'd stay with her for a while, then back to the workhouse. This went on till I was around 12 years old, and started finding regular work, which led me to being part of the Fred Carno company.
Ah, good old Fred Carno. Your act with them was an instant hit with American audiences in 1910 and with your repeat tour in 1912. What made the repeat tour in 1912 so important?
Our tour in 1912 was bigger because of our success from the previous tour, which got more important people to come to them. This is the tour where Max Sennett from the Keystone Film Company noticed my drunkard act and sent me a telegram with a job offer to go into the film business for 150 a week. And that was double what I was making with Fred Carno. So after my contract with Fred was up, I made my way to California.
Now, shortly after your arrival to Keystone, you introduced the tramp character. How did you come up with it?
Well, the tramp character came to be when I was on the set for Mabel's Strange Predicament. I was asked to put on some comedy makeup and that anything would do. So I made my way to the wardrobe with no idea on what to put on at first, but along the way I knew that I wanted the outfit to be full of contradictions. Hence the coat tight, pants baggy, the hat small, shoes too large, and remembered that Mac expected me to be older when I first arrived, so I put the small mustache on to add the age, but it wouldn't hide my expression. I didn't have an idea for the character when I first put this all on, but the moment I dressed it made me understand who he was and who he was going to be. So by the time I was on stage, he was fully born.
That's truly amazing how you could come up with and bring a character to life the way you did and as fast as you did. The Tramp is a legendary figure and most memorable out of all the film industry and is still used in many ways today. What made you not want to bring voice to your movies when the technology first came out?
Well, the way I thought about it was like this. The day the tramp spoke would be the day he died. Because with silent films, he was universal, and his films at that time were more famous overseas. And I felt that throwing in the language barrier would not only decrease profits, but also take away from the tramp's versatility and his character. I was also becoming more and more interested with composing my own music for the films at that time, and letting the music help set the mood for the films. So at first I used the technology that way, because back then they would have someone playing the music at the films and you could send the music score sheets. But I'm a perfectionist and never knew if they would actually perform it correctly. With the ability to attach my own music to the film, then I knew it would be right every time it played.
So that's why we haven't seen the Tramp again after The Great Dictator. What made you choose this film to be the one that the Tramp finally spoke in?
Talkies have been out for over 8 years by now, and I needed the message to be clear, so I needed the tramp to talk, even if that meant he was going to die. But at least he'd die saying something that he believed in. I mean, this is a film about pure satire against Adolf Hitler at the time he was going to war with England. So I needed to make sure that the message was clear because it was already a rough time in America. Because if you weren't on the right side of the politics, then everyone thought you were a communist.
Speaking of that rough time in America, it seems J. Edgar Hoover, while head of the FBI, kept files on you for over 50 years. This eventually led to you being unable to return to America in 1952 and led to your exile in Switzerland. What was that like?
Yeah, that guy never seemed to take his eye off of me, no matter what. I mean, my exile, though, that was very heartbreaking to say the least. America was my home for the past 40 years prior to that. and they helped me create everything I had achieved. This is what I had grown to love, but the America I knew had changed, and it became harder to produce any work because of the mindset America was going through at the time. I therefore gave up my residency in America and sent my wife Una back to retrieve all of her things, and we found a nice place that overlooked Lake Geneva in Switzerland.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of that 37-acre estate, and it looks like quite the place to retire to, especially after your long, hard career. Now, I have a couple more questions, and then we'll get out of here, but I was just wondering, what is it like to receive a 12-minute standing ovation like you did in 1972 at the Academy Awards?
Well, I'll tell you, I put it off at first, but my wife Una finally convinced me to go ahead and accept it and go back to the United States. They only gave me a 10-day visa, which my daughter hated, and she said it was a joke, but I just joked with her about it and said they're still scared of me. But yeah, while I was standing there for that 12-minute standing ovation, I was just overwhelmed with a bunch of feelings, accomplishment, and pride for my work, knowing that even after all these years, I was still touching the hearts of many, and it was very honorable.
Well, I want to thank you for being here today, Charlie. I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot about you. And I also want to wish you a happy birthday since your birthday was this week.
Ah, yes, it was my birthday this week, thank you. Me and Douglas Fairbanks threw a heck of a party, too. Should have been there. We even threw an invite out to J. Edgar, but he's still a rotten apple.
Some other quick facts about Charlie Chaplin. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth 2 years before his death, and a couple of months after his death, some burglars stole his body, took it for ransom. They were caught, and the body was returned.